Today I'm going to try to draw this potted agave plant in Tallinn, Estonia. And as the title suggests, the sun is out, and despite the overwhelming scent of sunscreen in the air, the back of my neck will burn. Will it be worth it? Let's find out. So first of all, why did I choose this to draw? Well, over the past few weeks, every once in a while, I will find a minute or two at a coffee shop to quickly sketch something I see. I'm at a lot of coffee shops, so I've done this quite a few times. And as you can imagine, coffee cups crop up often, but I also try to draw furniture, silverware, plants, whatever catches my eye. I suck at this. I'm not very good at it. The coffee cups look fine, but not because they look like the reference, they just look like cups, which means I'm relying on my brain more than my eyes. The furniture is a toss-up. I find sets of tables and chairs pretty manageable, but couches, recliners, anything that has any amount of cushion has proved impossible. Silverware is a nightmare, always. The perspective is so off, and they're either dimensionless or way too thick. And then plants are probably my best bet. The pots aren't always great, but I can get reasonably close to making them look kinda sorta right. So, through this consistent failure, I've realized I just need to try harder and more often, so that's what I'm doing. Sure, I like the way this reference looks. The red wall is nice and all, but I ultimately chose it so I could take a more purposeful step into drawing specific objects like this one. And I have more to say about that, which I'll get back to in just a second. But for now, let's see how I'm doing with the drawing. As you can see, this is looking pretty ugly. It's not bad. We've not made it far enough to know that yet, which is something I'm trying to learn. But there's nothing here that looks particularly nice or graceful. And ironically, that's perfectly fine with me. While at this point I still had a long way to go, I was feeling pretty good about the technique. Right before I started, I was this close to, and I'm holding my fingers really close together. They're practically touching. Try to visualize it. To drawing the whole silhouette first. I figured, what's the harm in getting the whole shape in right away? It's not something I usually do, but that doesn't mean anything. I don't know what the heck I'm doing here, so why shouldn't I draw the silhouette? Needless to say, I'm glad I actually didn't do that. It might have helped me better keep track of its scale, but I also think I would have lost the plot pretty fast, veering into like symbols where I draw like the cartoon version of the thing. So yeah, really happy I had a change of heart. However, that led into my next idea, which was to start with the pot. At the end of the day, that probably wouldn't have been terrible, but I would have ended up with some overlapping lines. And who's to say, maybe I would have gone too big with the plant and left the pot like irreparably small. Plus, the plant itself was what interested me most, so I finally landed on starting there. As opposed to big, broad silhouettes, I'm observing each leaf, which if you're surprised that's what these things are called, I'm right there with you, but I looked it up, and that's what I found, so leaf it is. But I'm observing them one at a time, and I'm trying to notice two things. First, the shape, naturally. Sometimes I feel like I sound so stupid making these videos, but I promise it's not as simple as it seems. I know that I defer to my brain more than I do my eyes, like the coffee cups. So here, I'm trying really hard to do the opposite. My eyes know what's there, and my brain is giving me extraneous information. It's irrelevant to the task at hand. So I can pick out any one of these leaves and look at it for a few seconds and instinctually grasp the shape, but then my brain kicks in and tries to tell me that the leaf is actually, pointing this way, so I need to draw it like it's doing that thing and blah, blah, blah. I don't need any of that. But after a few more seconds, really trying to sit with it, the 3D nature of it starts to fall away, and I can see the shapes again. I found that kind of blurring my vision in and out can help with that. along with closing one eye, but I imagine it's different for everyone. I'm mostly just trying to tell myself to find the two-dimensional shapes and to avoid exaggerating them. And that's the first thing. The second thing is the shadow. I won't go into it like I always do, but seeing this on a screen in true two dimensions means that you can plainly see these stark lines where light meets dark. Again, rather than conceptualize them, I'm treating these lines as the midpoints between two broader shapes. Sometimes I still draw the whole silhouette and then separate it into light and dark, but as long as I'm not overthinking it, I'm content. I don't want to get bogged down by thinking of this as shading, in part because there's little nuance here. A lot of it's just, light or dark, black or white, but especially because I'll just confuse myself. As you can see, I have these broader shapes and I have these areas where there's darkness, and that's 90% of my focus. It's not perfect, but as far as realism is concerned, I'm doing a lot better than I expected. Right, so let's talk a little bit more about objects. As I said, I've been having a tough time with them, and I'm trying to think about why that is. Why do I feel decently comfortable drawing a church tower, for instance, but completely out of my depth when it comes to a teaspoon? There are innumerable reasons, no doubt, but here's one that I think might get close. I tend to draw things that are either strict or really not. And something like this agave or a teaspoon falls somewhere in between. And when I say strict, I don't mean objectivity, like the thing has to look exactly like the thing. I mean the drawing process, like the physical motion is strict. For example, a church tower is made up of, again, strict and kind of obvious shapes, whereas yesterday's tree is amorphous and therefore up for interpretation. A teaspoon doesn't really fall into either of these boxes because its lines aren't really rigid or straightforward like the tower, nor vague and textural like the tree. Instead, they're specific and unique, and you can mess it all up by getting them, even a little bit wrong. So when I draw 5 towers and 5 trees back to back, of course I'm exaggerating, but you get the point, and I don't make time for these strange sort of oblong shapes, it's no wonder I have a hard time. Sitting down for 90 seconds to draw a spoon with its singular specifications and curvature and all the rest is evidently not enough. I need to allocate a lot more of my time, more of these drawings, the ones I video, to more things that fall somewhere in between my typical references. It's certainly possible I'm creating a weird false dichotomy here, and that actually I draw stuff in between all the time. Leave a comment if you think so, but I don't even think that really matters. If I am drawing that stuff all the time, I'm not thinking of them in that way, which makes it harder for me to transfer skills from one thing to another. Hopefully that makes sense. At the end of the day, the solution to my problem, as is consistently the case, is to practice more. So that's what I'll do. It might seem like I'm saying what I've already said 100 times, that is, needing to draw more single subjects, but I think it's more than that. Even within a larger scene, I could find things like this that live between, a house and a tree. I think a bicycle is somewhere close, but it's still pretty rigid. It's funny because I think objects are what people think of when they think of drawing in the first place. Like, can you draw this? Can you draw that? They're usually thinking about a fruit or an animal, not necessarily a street corner or whatever. So yeah, if I can, I'd like to include more references that deal with a wider variety of things so that I don't suck so much at drawing those things. Well, at this point, the plant is complete and I've moved on somewhat apprehensively to this window in the top left corner. I didn't know if I'd get to this, so I was concerned that I would messily scribble it in at the last second and ultimately ruin my otherwise fine agave. But actually, it's not that bad. I've been doing quite a bit of line work practice at home, drawing a million circles and squares and straight lines back to back. And I think that's helped me a lot. While this window is by no means excellent, there are some lines in there that I'm pretty pleased with, especially the vertical ones. Please don't look too hard at them. I rushed through the horizontal ones, I'll admit, but I'm happy to see some of these slick, straight, more confident ones that I certainly couldn't have done at the start. My hand is much more stable than in previous weeks, which is yet another indication of progress, and that's awesome. The window, though, yeah, could have excluded it altogether. It does more for the reference video than it does for the drawing, but whatever, that's okay. In the end, it looks better than most of my other windows, so I'll take it as a win. And you know what? This could have gone sideways a couple of times, but I'm pretty satisfied. It reminds me of a really low fidelity copy of something grainy and old, but maybe there's something in there. I think the shadow's a little dramatic, and like I said, the window is unnecessary, but all in all, not terrible, and I don't hate it. What do you think? Does it roughly resemble a plant? Let me know in the comments. And while you're down there, please like the video and subscribe to the channel and share it with your cousin on Facebook. Anyway, I appreciate you for taking the time to watch this one, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.